Hello, 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 it's me. Welcome back to another video of getting acquainted with Photoshop. I'm Svenja from Svenja Christina Photography, and I love to create dreamy, magical images in Photoshop. Now I'm going to walk you through this big and intimidating program step by step so that you can use it with confidence too. Today, I'm going to show you different adjustment layers that modify color. We're going to talk about the Vibrance adjustment layer, the hue saturation adjustment layer, and the color balance layer. Now, I'm also going to teach you how to turn a file black and white. There's different ways. We'll cover those. And how to save out your file. And then we'll dive into Photoshop preference settings, and I'll show you some nifty tricks in there. So we have a lot to do. Grab that coffee, and let's get started. I want to redirect your attention again to the adjustment layers, and I want to mention a few that deal with color, starting with the Vibrance layer. So if I click into that upside down triangle, which is called the Vibrance adjustment layer, you will see two sliders. One is called Vibrance, the other one is called Saturation. Now they both do the same thing, but Saturation affects all the colors in the same intensity, whereas Vibrance is like a smart saturation in that it protects skin tones and it focuses on increasing the intensity of muted colors, more so than the colors that are already saturated. So let's check it out. I'm going to turn off the curves layer so we can see it more clearly. If I take my Vibrance all the way down, the image becomes black and white, and if I take it all the way up, it becomes more saturated. This is strongly saturated. It would be too strong for my liking, but it's not really super crazy. So let's see what saturation does if we take it all the way to the right. Honestly, it's not super crazy either. And same thing, it also turns everything black and white. The next slider I want to explore with you is hue saturation. With this one, you can also affect the saturation, as in you turn the saturation slider left, the image turns black and white, and if I take it all the way up, that gives you crazy saturation. This gives you really strange colors. The saturation is the intensity or the richness of a color. The hue here affects the color. So this here is the global slider. Let me just return that to 0 so we have color to work with. If we turn this left, you see that every single pixel on this image is beginning to change color. And if we turn it the other way, you'll see the same colors, just in a different order. You can adjust the color of the image. And then there is also lightness. So this affects the brightness of the image. In this case here, with the global slider, it affects all the colors. But with hue saturation, you can also go into individual colors, and there you have the exact same layout. So this option here would allow you to change all the yellows in the image. So you can see the trees have some yellow in it because they start to turn and change color. And then you can affect, say I wanted it like really poppin' green, I could affect the saturation by boosting it, making it really crazy. And I could also affect, let's leave that here just for illustration purposes, the lightness. So if I move it up, this brightens it, which cancels out super intense saturation. And if you take it down, it darkens it, but it also takes away from saturation. We also can affect the reds and the greens, the cyans, the blues, and the magentas. I'm not going to go into this in depth. You can play with it as much as you want to. But what I would like to point out is this hand tool with the sliders. If we click on this hand tool and the sliders and we are on our layer, we click the hand tool and say, I just want to change the wing. It's going to affect, this one here is going to affect the reds. If I drag this over to the right, it increases just the red, say like so. If I drag it to the other side, it's going to desaturate my reds, and only the reds. See, my reds are desaturated, but my greens and my blue tones are still intact. So this is a really handy tool to have, and you can click in the exact spot that you want to change the color and affect the change with that particular hand tool. So this is really nifty. I'm gonna reset that. Another thing I wanted to show you is the option to colorize. So if I click colorize, say I just wanted it on my goose, I'm gonna grab my refined mask and drag it up here in my saturation layer. We have colorize selected. It already presets you with a saturation of 25%. And you can, of course, change that. And you can also change the hue. Say I wanted to have my goose blue. So I'm going to move my hue slider up. Now it's turning green, and then we get into the cyans and into the blues. So here it starts to turn purple. So there would be blue. And if I wanted the color more intense, I'm just going to amp up the saturation like that. And then I can get a more accurate idea and move it a bit over. Now I have a nice royal blue, and I can change it. I can make it lighter or darker. So this is just a real quick overview of that. Next up is the color balance tool, which I actually really enjoy. Now, the color balance is similar to the curves and the levels with regards to the red, green, and blue channel. Now let's get back here into the actual layer. It has the reds, the green, and the blue. And its opposites are listed as well. So red is cyan, green and magenta, blue and yellow. However, it also allows you to be very selective in your colors where you want to make adjustments. You can choose between affecting the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. And there is this preserve luminosity mask that is already comes pre-check marked, and you would want that to be pre-check marked because it preserves whatever light situation is going on in your image. It will ensure that it stays that way. So it basically helps your image not to turn flat. So let's again colorize the goose. I'm using my layer mask here, only my goose, and say I just wanted to add some reds to the midtones. I'm just going to add towards the red here. If I wanted to make the goose more cyan, I'm going to drag it the other way around. You push it towards the color that you like. Say I thought my goose was too yellow here. Say I thought that was too yellow. I would want to take away yellow by pushing more of the blues. But the yellows are more in the highlights. So I don't want to be in the midtones too much. I'm going to just reset that by pressing 0. I'm going to select highlights, and then I'm going to add blues to the highlights. And it probably also has some red in it, so I'm going to push towards the cyan, and there the goose is cool now. Same holds true for the shadows. If I wanted to have the blacks in the goose, say I wanted them red, I'm going to take my sliders, move them towards red. I could also add some magenta, or I could not add some, you can play around, see what it does, have fun with it. And I'm also going to show you, I'm going to go to an extreme. I'm going to color the goose. I'm going to make it blue. So I'm going to add some blue to the shadows. I'm going to add some cyan as well. Then I'm going to do the same thing in the midtone area and in my highlights. You already have some here. Perfect. Now what happens if I take this little check mark off? See how it turned a lot flatter? And it does that for all three. I'm just going to toggle this on and off for you so you can see. It looks a lot more flat like that. And here, the tonal values are being preserved. So that's why you want to keep the check mark on preserve luminosity. You can turn a layer black and white either by using the Vibrance and turning that slider towards the left, or this slider towards the left, or you could do that with the hue saturation global slider. When it says master here, you just drag that towards the left. That's all going to give you a black and white image, or you could just click into this layer here that says black and white. Now this has a bunch of other controls that I'm not going to get into today in this video, but this is a really quick way to turn your image black and white. So this is it with regards to the adjustment layers. If I wanted to access these adjustment layers, this is the quickest and the easiest way, and I would highly recommend that you go this route. However, I feel like in order to tell you everything, I should also mention that you can go into image and adjustments. As you can see, I can affect brightness, contrast, levels, curves, and there is a whole bunch grayed out. You know why? It's because I'm on this layer right here. If I go back to an actual layer like here with actual pixel information, and I go into my image and my adjustments, they're all available here. However, if you click this, say I'm going to click hue saturation, my hue saturation menu pops up and it's identical to this one here. I can't click it right now because this one's the one that's selected. But yeah, it's the identical menu to what you've just seen before. Say I'm just going to stay on my masters and I'm going to colorize it. And I'm going to choose a winterish blue hue. And I'm done with it for illustration purposes. See, this one here is not affected because that was my stamp tool. This edit, this hue saturation adjustment, there is no extra layer right here, no hue saturation adjustment layer like this. The changes I made are baked into my edit, so I highly recommend that you do not go the route image adjustments and make your adjustments that way. I'm gonna click Command Z until I'm rid of this again. You can group all of your layers. So the way I did that was I clicked my top layer, I pressed my Shift key, and then I'm clicking the bottom layer. Actually, I could add this one here as well. And then I'm going to press Command G on my keyboard and this groups my layers. And I'm just going to label that edit. Not that it did anything because I turned all the layers off, but now I have them all selected. That gives you more space and you can add more layers. And when you're done all your edits, you can save your image. Now, how do you do that? You can press Command S on your keyboard or you can go into File. I'm going to click Save As. I'm going to choose Photoshop. This will give you all of the layers that you have. If you have a very large file, one that is greater than 2 gigabytes, you can save it as a large document format. This is basically the PSD file, just called PSB. It's the same thing, just for like greater than 2 gigabytes. And I sometimes hit that, so that's how I save it. But yeah, you would want to save it as a PSD file to keep all of your layers. See, layers here is checked, and it's gonna go and put that PSD file right into the folder where your original file was. So I'm just gonna go ahead and click Save, and you see here my image is now a PSD file. If I wanted to save it as a JPEG, I'm gonna click Save As again, and then JPEG. And as you can see, there's no layers here. I'm gonna go click ahead, and it gives you the options, and I'm always gonna choose baseline standard, and I want my file to be large, so quality is 12 maximum, and I'm gonna click OK. Now my file is being saved out as a JPEG file. If I wanted to optimize this file for social media, say I've done all my edits, I'm gonna go click File, Export, Save for Web. And that brings up this lovely menu right here. And here you can change your size. So for social media, my usual size is 2048, and the height is being adjusted automatically. And this is perfect for Instagram or Facebook. I also keep the quality at 100%, but of course you could change that to whatever you see fit. And you're just going to click Save. And then it confirms with you where you want it saved. Now I already have a JPEG here, so I'm just going to go ahead and label that Web. And then you're done. My personal strategy is to save this image as a PSD file, and I work through Lightroom, so I have my file back in Lightroom with my Photoshop changes applied to it, and then I export everything through Lightroom. So I saved this file. Now these are all the edits we have made, and this is my history. However, if I close this file down, I will lose all of this history. This will not be available anymore. My layers here will be available. So if I close it down, I don't want to save. I saved everything anyway. Now, I'm going to show you what it looks like when I access that file through my folders menu. Here's my folders menu, my tutorial, and this was my PSD file. I'll double click it. Exact same file. My history is not there. All of my layers have been preserved. That's that. Now that we have saved our file, I recommend that you do that often. And also I recommend that you go into Photoshop, Preferences, and you want to go into File Handling. And here you see this little menu called File Saving Options. I believe the default is set to 10 minutes. This means Photoshop automatically saves a recovery file every 10 minutes, and I set it to 5 minutes, because if you are carried away and you're editing and you're completely forgetting to save and your computer crashes, then this is going to be handy because you only lose a maximum of 5 minutes of your time as opposed to 10. And a lot can happen in 10 minutes. So I highly recommend you go into this here. So that is Photoshop, Preferences, brings this preference menu up, File Handling, and then you want to set this here to 5 minutes. And then you want to click OK. Another thing you should do is Preferences, and you want to come to Performance, and then History States. You want to drag that all the way to the right, because this is going to affect how much of your history is being saved here. And I want the maximum history states available, because sometimes you get carried away with editing and you realize you need to go back. And sometimes you have to go back quite a bit. And then it's really helpful if you have that accessible right here. So my friend, that was a lot. We looked at different adjustment layers that modify color. I showed you how to turn your image black and white, how to save out your image, and we covered some very important Photoshop preference settings. If you found today's video helpful, please give me a thumbs up and share it so that other people can benefit from it as well. Feel free to subscribe to my channel. I would love it to have you on board here. And if you have any questions about this tutorial or any requests of what you would like me to cover in the future, please drop a comment below, and I look forward to hearing from you. Next week, I'll be back with another tutorial on how to blur your images the right way. So I'll hope to see you then. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.